in the time before time had a name, nestled between a golden savanna and a river that hummed old songs. There was a village called Amara. Red clay huts with thatched roofs curved around a great baobab tree at the center of the village, its trunk wide enough for 10 children to hide inside. Mango trees lined the dusty paths, their fruit hanging heavy and sweet. Old women wore indigo-dyed wrappers and pounded millet in the mornings, and the sound of the pestles kept rhythm like the heartbeat of the earth itself. In this village lived a girl named Adiz, 8 years old, with wide bright eyes the color of river stones, 2 thick braids tied with red cloth, and a gap between her front teeth that showed itself every time she laughed, which was often. She wore a wrapper of orange and yellow kenny cloth around her waist and a simple white blouse, and she almost always had a small gourd of water tied at her hip, because she visited the river every single morning before the sun was fully awake. One morning, as Adiz knelt at the riverbank to fill her gourd, she heard a voice, slow, deep, and terribly self-satisfied. "Move along, child. You are standing in my light." She looked down and saw a tortoise, larger than any she had ever seen, his shell painted in geometric patterns of deep green and brown, like the finest cloth in the market. He walked with an exaggerated, deliberate dignity, his chin lifted high. "You can speak," Adiz gasped, nearly dropping her gourd. "Of course I can speak," said the tortoise, not pausing his walk. "I am MBA, the great tortoise. I have lived 400 rains. I know every root and every rock along this river. I need nothing and no one." He stopped, turned his ancient head toward her, and added with a sniff, "Least of all, the help of a small girl." Days passed. The hot season arrived like an unwelcome guest who stayed too long. The sky turned white with heat. The grass of the savanna went brittle and gold. Animals gathered at the river in larger numbers, their tongues thick with thirst. It was during this time that Adiz, filling her gourd one morning, heard the river itself make a different sound, a low, hollow gurgling, like a great stomach emptying. She pressed her ear to the water. The river was shrinking. Adiz ran through the village, her braids flying, her bare feet raising little puffs of red dust. "The river is going. The river is going dry," she cried. The village elders gathered under the baobab, their faces grave, their colorful Agbada robes and heavy brass jewelry catching the punishing sun. After a long silence, the eldest, a woman named Mama Chidinma, with a face mapped by 90 years of living, spoke. "There is one who knows where the hidden spring of Yuzo lies, but he will not share his secrets." Everyone looked at each other. Everyone knew who she meant. Adiz found MBA at his usual spot, beneath a flat rock near a bend in the river, chewing slowly on a wild fig leaf, with the expression of someone who had decided, long ago, that the world existed for his personal comfort. "MBA," she said, crouching down so she could meet his ancient yellow eyes. "Our river is dying. The animals, the children, the old ones, they will have nothing to drink. You know where the hidden spring is. Please." MBA chewed. He swallowed. He looked at her for a long time. "I have kept that secret for 340 years, he said finally. "Why would I share it now?" Adiz did not cry. She did not beg again. Instead, she said something that surprised even herself. "Then I will find it myself." And she turned and walked toward the thorn bush. MBA blinked his slow, ancient blink. Something stirred in the chambers of his old heart, something he had not felt in perhaps 200 years. Curiosity. Maybe. Even something approaching shame. He watched the small girl push bravely into the crackling dry brush, and without fully understanding why, he began to follow. Deep in the bush, Adiz found a young hare named Saku tangled in a net of old vines, thrashing wildly. Without a second thought, she knelt and worked at the vines with her fingers until the hare burst free, panting. "Thank you. Oh, thank you, child." Saku cried, shaking dry leaves from his tawny fur. "Where are you going in this terrible heat?" When Adiz explained, Saku straightened his long ears. "I know a path through the valley. It avoids the worst of the thorns. Follow me." MBA arrived just in time to hear this and said nothing, but he followed. The 3 unlikely companions walked together, a brave girl, a rapid-footed hare, and a slow, proud tortoise who kept some distance behind, pretending he was simply traveling in the same direction by coincidence. They passed a grove of leadwood trees where an old elephant named Nkosi stood with her head low, too weak from thirst to lift it. Adiz pressed her small hand to the elephant's great wrinkled cheek. "We are going to find the spring," she whispered. "Hold on." A single tear rolled down Nkosi's grey face. "Go quickly, little one," the elephant rumbled, so softly the ground barely trembled. As the sun dropped low and painted the sky in copper and rose, the group reached the base of a rocky ridge, and here the path split. Suku's path went left, around a long winding slope. The right path went straight up a sheer cliff face. Adiz stared at both paths, exhausted. They were running out of time. "We should go left. It is safer," said Suku. Then, for the first time since leaving the river, MBA's deep voice broke through. "No." Everyone stared at him. "The spring is above that ridge. Left will take us there by morning. But the animals, Nkosi, cannot wait until morning." Adiz looked at MBA, really looked at him. For 400 rains, he had lived alone. He had watched the river from his rock. He had seen droughts before. He had the knowledge. He had always had the knowledge. And here, finally, was the moment he chose to use it for someone else. "You know this ridge," she said quietly. It was not a question. "I do," he admitted. "There is a narrow crack at the top, wide enough for you and Suku. But not for me." He looked at her steadily with his great old eyes. "You will have to go without me." Adiz climbed. The rock face was hot from the day's sun, and the handholds were sharp. Her fingers bled a little. Suku bounded ahead, calling back encouragement. "Left. Left here. Now pull." His long ears silhouetted against the darkening sky. Below, MBA watched in silence, his great patterned shell gleaming in the last light. He felt something that pride had long prevented him from feeling, the need for another person to succeed. He found himself holding his breath, which, for a tortoise, was remarkable. She pulled herself through the narrow crack at the top and gasped. There, hidden in a bowl of rock, surrounded by green ferns that should not have existed in this heat, was the spring of Yuzo. Water welled up from the dark earth, clear and cold and constant. Flowers, tiny white ones, circled its edge as if they had been placed there by careful hands. The sound of it was like music, like the gentle singing of grandmothers in the early morning. Adiz sat down beside it and, for the first time since this journey began, she let herself cry, not from sadness, but from relief so strong it had no other way out. Adiz and Suku drank deeply, then quickly worked to divert a channel of the spring's water toward the ridge edge where it could flow, down to the valley. But when they descended and found MBA, he was not where they had left him. He lay on his side, his great shell cracked along one side, beside a large rock. He had tried to climb after them. He had fallen. MBA. Adiz dropped to her knees beside him. The old tortoise blinked slowly. He was alive. Bruised and cracked, but alive. "Why?" she breathed. "You said you couldn't make it. You said—" "I know what I said," MBA interrupted, his voice smaller than she had ever heard it. "But you were climbing for others, and I realized." He paused, as tortoises do when they are thinking something very large. "I have never climbed for anyone but myself. I wanted to know how it felt." By morning, the water had found the old riverbed. Adiz ran ahead to tell the village, and by the time the spring's flow reached the valley, the people of Amara were already at the riverbank with gourds and clay, pots and children on their hips. There was singing, deep, call and response singing, that rose into the pale morning air, and ululating from the women, and the children splashed and laughed until their clothes were soaked through. Old Nkosi the elephant arrived last, moving slowly, and when she reached the water, she stood in it and closed her eyes for a very long time. Suku brought MBA to the river on a flat piece of bark, sliding him gently along the wet grass with his quick feet. The animals made way. The villagers made way. When MBA finally reached the water's edge and drank, slowly, deliberately, As was his nature, a deep, spontaneous silence fell over the crowd. Mama Chidinma, the eldest, walked to him with her brass-bangled arms and knelt with great effort beside the cracked old tortoise. "The village of Amara will remember your name," she said. MBA said nothing, but his chin, for once, was not lifted. It rested quietly near the water, and somehow this was more dignified than all his years of pride. That evening, under the baobab tree, the village held a feast. There was jollof rice steaming in iron pots, fried plantains stacked in towers, groundnut soup thick with crayfish and palm oil, and suya, spiced grilled meat, turning on sticks above the fire. Drums played and feet moved, and the children danced the way children only dance when there is no school tomorrow and the food is very good. Adi sat beside MBA, sharing a bowl of mango slices, saying little, which was unusual for her. Then Mama Chidinma came forward with something wrapped in banana leaves. She unwrapped it before the whole village. It was a mixture of river clay and crushed malachite, green and brown, the exact colors of MBA's shell. With careful, reverent hands, she pressed it along the crack in his shell, smoothing it gently. The crack did not disappear. It was still visible, still there. "We do not hide what you have carried," Mama Chidinma said. "We fill it with something beautiful."